Hello everyone, I'm Russ McLean, Chair of the Patient Voices Group. It's Monday the 20th of February and today I'm in discussion with Mr Kevin McGee, Chief Executive Officer of East Lancashire Hospitals Teaching Trust. Hello Kevin.
Hello Russ.
Now, I'd like to start straight away with your emergency department, your A&E. Have you managed to meet your 4-hour targets since we spoke a month ago?
So our performance is improving, but we've not hit the 95% target. And let's put this in context. There's very few trusts anywhere in the country who are now hitting the 95% target. We are seeing very, very high numbers of patients turning up at ED. We're seeing some very poorly patients. And as we always do, we will treat those patients and look after those patients in a professional and caring and kind way. But we are under a lot of pressure on the A&E.
Let's just talk about that. We've just arrived. It's Monday. It's 4:10 in the afternoon, and there are 17 ambulances outside your emergency department. I was actually quite shocked because obviously Saturday evening, perhaps I would have expected that. But a Monday afternoon, Kevin, what's going on?
We quite often get that. Afternoons can be incredibly busy times for us, so can early evenings. So 17 is a large number, but it's not out of the ordinary. That can occur.
Many patients, particularly those who live in the East Lancashire area, question the Trust's decision to close the accident and emergency department at Burnley. This was done over 10 years ago now. But all those years later, is one accident and emergency department for the size of the East Lancashire population enough?
So I think we need to really get below this and really understand this. So what we have on the Burnley site is an urgent care centre. And most of the patients who would have previously gone to the A&E departments in Burnley will still go to the urgent care centre in Burnley. It's only the blue light ambulances that we don't go into Burnley and get taken to the Blackburn, and they are relatively few in terms of number. The vast majority of patients who previously would have gone to Burnley still go to Burnley because we've got a very strong and very successful urgent care centre there. There's also across the patch, there's a minor injuries unit over in Rosendale, and there's a unit on the Accrington Victoria site. So as well as having the full A&E department in Blackburn, there's also other locations where patients can get seen if they have minor injuries, illnesses, urgent care needs or A&E needs. So you've got to put them all together. Now, the difficulty that we face and everybody faces in terms of A&E, if you were to say to me, right, there's the money to go and open another A&E somewhere else in East Lancashire, I would not be able to open one because there is not the staff to do so. So it's not a question of money, it's a question of actually workforce planning for the future, and there is not the A&E consultants to have a number of different locations. So it's far safer to have urgent care centres where we can have very experienced doctors but also very experienced nurses and other staff, and then concentrate the very senior medical staff on the Blackburn site where the most serious cases can come, and that is by far the best clinical practice and pathways.
You've almost answered the next question, but we'll ask it because someone's sent it in. But they're saying, well, would it not be better to think about investing in expanding your existing emergency department, which has obviously struggled to cope and continues to do so? Or would the Trust not be better in having at least one other A&E department on its huge patch? Obviously, as I said, you've answered some of those points. I guess the question would be then, Kevin, what's the answer? Are we going to see an improvement in the number of staff that we've got access to? That's the key, isn't it?
So we're doing work on many different fronts in terms of improving performance, safety and patients' experience through the urgent care and A&E departments. So we're looking at the physical capacity that we've got. Can we expand and open more cubicles? We're looking, can we get other doctors to reach into accidents and emergency departments such as paediatricians, orthopaedic surgeons to support A&E. We're also looking, can we have a different skill mix? So can we train up more experienced nurses and have nurse consultants as an example? We put physiotherapists into A&E departments to help with musculoskeletal issues. So we think there's some really exciting stuff that we can do. It's all taking time to put in place because clearly you've got to recruit the staff, you've got to train the staff. If you're doing physical changes, you've got to commission the work and fund and then build. But there is some really good work going on that's looking at urgent care and emergency care that will really help us to improve the position going forward. But ultimately, I keep coming back to the fact that at this point, there is not enough A&E consultants to cope with the demand that we have coming through. Therefore, we've got to use our resources and consolidate our resources in the most appropriate way.
And is that something that happens across the country, or is it just this trust that's experiencing that hardship?
No, I mean, the recruitment issues around, particularly around emergency and urgent care, they are national issues. In fact, in many respects, we do better in many locations in terms of recruitment, and I've got some really strong, experienced and dedicated A&E staff.
Is this hospital too big to be able to care, is a question that we've had in. So is this hospital trying to be too many things to too many people? The size of the site here, certainly at Royal Blackburn, is huge. And of course, Burnley seems to be expanding every year. But the question is it too big to be able to care?
I mean, this is a big hospital, and we have many different services on this site. But there are other hospitals up and down the country that are bigger than this hospital. Actually, I think what we do here is really well. You look at the vast majority of the services that we have on both the Burnley and the Blackburn site, and I think they're second to none. I keep saying this, and I will continue to say it. I think we should be really proud of the services that we have. We pride ourselves on delivering safe, personal and effective care. We don't always get everything right, and there are times when things go wrong. Unfortunately, that is the nature of healthcare, and that happens in every hospital up and down the country. But we're really working night and day to deliver the best possible care for our population, and I think we should be really proud of the services that we have on this site and on the Burnley site and on our community hospitals.
You took the very brave decision to allow TV cameras into your A&E, which clearly showed patients having to wait for long periods of time in corridors on trolleys. Why the sudden change in tack? For years, hospitals have seemed to toe the government line, as it were, and almost underplayed the very real problems that all trusts are facing. And now it's almost as though you and other trusts are holding up your own shortcomings for all to see. So why the change? What sort of feedback have you had from local politicians and, of course, patients since you featured quite heavily in the news?
Well, I think it's really important that we are very open and honest, and I think we've always taken that tack ever since I've been in this post. We've always tried to be very open, very honest, and be proud of what we do well, but also to recognise where we need to improve. And I think that's how you do improve. I think if you don't recognise there are issues, then that's difficult. So we will always be an organisation that's open, honest. But what I think we showed by doing that work is, in spite of a service and a department that was incredibly busy, and it was incredibly busy, actually what we showed were people being treated with care, with dignity and respect. Even when people were on corridors, there were always doctors, there was nurses, there was paramedics looking after their needs. But what I really wanted to show by doing that and opening the doors to the BBC was just the enormous pressure that the staff are under. But in spite of that enormous pressure, how well and how hard and how professional they work. And I was very proud of our staff for doing that piece, and I think the staff came out of it incredibly well.
And what sort of feedback have you had? Have you had some good feedback from that? The feedback has been very, very positive. I think staff themselves welcome the fact that it was shown. I've had feedback from other NHS organisations that have been very positive. There's been patients and relatives feedback. So yes, it has been positive. I accept that there was risks in what we did, but I think it was the right thing to do. I think people were perhaps a little shocked to see the reality of an A&E department in a trust which is sort of, the same across the whole country. Can I just stay with your A&E for one moment? And I think it's timely for us to remind people that if you have not had an accident or an emergency, you should not be coming to the A&E department.
I think that's right, and you can see that the pressure that the staff are under. So even if somebody turns up at A&E or urgent care, and then we triage them and send them home, it still takes time, because everybody who comes in has to be seen, has to be triaged, and dealt with, and it all takes time and puts pressure in the system. So really would say to anybody listening, really think about whether you need to come to one of the urgent cares or A&E. Of course, if you need to, you will always be seen and cared for. But there is 111 where you can get advice. You've got our local GP services, there are local pharmacists, and of course there's home care as well. So just think very carefully about whether you need A&E or urgent care.
The United Kingdom has the second lowest number of hospital beds per head in Europe. NHS hospital bed numbers have plunged by 20% over the past decade, and in January it's been reported that almost 3/4 of all trusts had a bed occupancy rate of 95% on at least one day the first week in January. Were your trust, in that 3/4, and what is your current bed occupancy?
So yes, bed occupancy was very high. It was around about the 95%, and to be fair, it's dropped a little bit since then, but we do have occasional days when it goes back up to that level. So bed occupancy is very, very high. We're always continuously looking to the balance between the people we admit and the people we discharge. And there are times when we try and admit more than we discharge, and that puts enormous pressure and strain in the system. So it is a continual issue and problem for us, and I think it's like all busy acute trusts, we face that dilemma.
You and I have spoken on a number of occasions previously about the ageing population and the fact that quite often there are a huge number of beds where people are medically fit for discharge but couldn't be sent home because they need that continuing social care. But in your blog a couple of weeks ago, you spoke quite candidly about the fact that 40% of people over 80 are frail. Half of those 40% are in the last year of your life. Are those the people that are putting that strain on resources across the country?
I really wouldn't want to explain it that way or to describe it that way, because clearly those people need our services, and we will always be here to look after those people. So I wouldn't describe it that way. But we do have an ageing population. You go around the wards now, and many of the beds are occupied by frail elderly people. You do have to question at times whether somebody at the end of their life, or on the end of life pathway, whether a hospital bed is the best place for those individuals and for their family.
Could you explain what you mean by that, where there should be?
Well, there's lots of different options, aren't there? So, if we could look after people in their own homes, or look after people in nursing homes, or look after people in hospice care, there are different. There's nothing more certain than death for all of us, is there? That's the reality. And I think as a society we've got to get better, and we're working really hard in terms of planning for end of life care. But I still think on occasions we get too many instances where people at their end of life end up in an acute hospital because there isn't a more suitable place, and that's not right. There's got to be better places, and as a society we've got to look after people at the end of their life in a better way and in more appropriate settings.
I'm not going to encourage or ask you to put a slur on local government or central government, but I'm not a clinician. I haven't been around the health economy for a number of years like you have. But what I do know is that for the past 20 years, we've had an ageing population. Why do you think it is that nothing's been done? Or do you think that people haven't really thought about the huge problem? They haven't acknowledged the fact that there is a huge problem.
Well, if you think about a hospital, it doesn't exist in isolation, and it's part of a bigger system. So, we talk about people coming in through A&E, but just as bigger issue that we have are people who we define as being medically fit for discharge, but we can't discharge because there isn't the social care or the services available in there to support people in their own home or nursing homes, etc. So that is a real issue for us. I think in Pennine, Lancashire, we work really well and strongly with both Blackburn with Darwen Council and also with Lancashire County Council. But it is fair to say that there has been enormous strains on the social care budgets. And it's a national problem. It's not just a local issue, it's a national problem. And of course, if there's strains on their budgets, and that means it's more difficult for us to get patients out of hospital beds, then we have stresses and strains, and we talked about occupancy rates before, but our occupancy rate in terms of our beds gets higher because we have people who are fit for discharge, but physically we can't move because there is no place for them to go.
And I think, and of course I can say this, you can't, but the problem with local governments is that successive governments, whether they be Labour or Conservative controlled, have cut the number of social care beds, they've cut the number of mental health beds, and really this is something that's coming back to bite everybody.
There are certainly problems in terms of social care capacity up and down the country, and in Lancashire and in Pennine, Lancashire, we have those problems.
Hospitals are colour-coded as to the alert that they're on. Could you explain that colour coding and tell us currently what colour Royal Blackburn Hospital is on?
So we have an escalation process that has 4 levels in it, 1 being normal operating processes, 4 being the highest level of alert. Over the last sort of few weeks, we've gone from level 2 to level 3 and backwards and forwards. We're currently sitting just on the cusp of level 3 to level 2. Level 4 would be what I suppose historically you would define as some form of internal incident. We're currently on level 3. Over the weekend we were on level 2, so we oscillate between 2 and 3 at this point.
We're 20th of February today, so hopefully we're sort of coming into the spring months. Do you look at this period and think, thank God, we've got through it, that we're going to make it into spring?
Well, clearly we talk about winter pressures, but what we're seeing in most A&E departments now is there's pressure all year round. So, I would hope there would be some let up in terms of the activity and the numbers, but I don't expect things to improve radically in terms of activity. What we have to do is the work I was talking about before, some of the improvements that we're putting in, we have to continue working on that and allow them to start taking hold, to take some of the pressure off the system. But I think, the pressures that we face in the NHS, and particularly in terms of bed occupancy levels and in terms of the A&E, I think they are all year round issues. They just get particular focus during December and January and February.
We're going to talk a moment about the finances here at the Trust, but I wanted to mention, of course, that the fact that you've had to cancel, no doubt, like all the other trusts across the country, some elective operations. Will that have had some significant impact on your finances?
So we have cancelled some elective activity, but not a great deal in comparison to many other places, because what we've been working on throughout the year is to have a very large elective day case unit based on the Burnley site, and most of our elective activity day case wide now takes place over there. So we ring fence that with those beds, and that can take place regardless of the pressures that we're under. So I think because of the planning we've done, we've been able to keep the emergency flow on the Blackburn site and most of the elective work ring fenced on the Burnley site.
With the news that this week the CCGs across the country are tendering more and more hospital services, how worried are you that ELHT will begin to see services cut and or tendered?
Well, I would hope we wouldn't see services cut or tendered. I have a very clear view on this. I think that we should be looking to integrate services across Pennine, Lancashire, and bring services together between health, between social care, and we shouldn't be looking to splinter services by tendering. So it really annoys me if we go out and we tender and we're looking to tender lots of services, because it stops the integration. It brings in more barriers, it brings in more costs in the long run, and I think it reduces the quality of service provision. So I am really strongly opposed to it, and I will argue that in any corner.
And is this a very real threat in Lancashire?
I would hope not. I would hope that colleagues will see sense on this, but I've got to continually fight this argument, and I will do so because it is absolute nonsense.
More and more hospital trusts are reporting that there's been, and I quote, a significant deterioration in their finances in recent months. A major teaching trust has been forced to revise its year-end forecast from 20 to 27 million deficit after failing to hit its financial targets and losing out on half of its sustainability and transformation funding. There seems to be a worsening financial performance at a number of trusts, which is perhaps the result of a number of factors, including, as we've just discussed, the cancellation of elective work due to pressure on accident and emergency, and of course the outsourcing of planned operations to private providers to hit waiting time standards. How are your finances, Kevin? And is the trust confident that it will not be placed into financial special measures?
So I'm confident that we will not be placed into financial special measures, but we have to work very hard day in, day out to keep control of our finances, and it is tight, as with any other trust in the country. But this year, so our financial year ends on the 31st of March, so we're coming up to the end of the financial year, we will hit the control totals that we've been set by the Department of Health. So we will have hit our financial obligations for this year. And what we're doing now is clearly planning for next year to make sure if I'm sitting here this time next year, I can say exactly the same thing to you.
Same with finances. Lord Carter, who's a Labour peer and non-executive director of NHS Improvement, has questioned the recent NHS decision to spend £604 million on external management consultancies. Can you tell me whether the trust actually employs or engages expensive management consultants?
So we haven't got any expensive management consultants, but I suppose it depends on what your definition of an expensive management consultant is. Occasionally we do have to use locum and agency administration staff to cover some gaps, or there's particular pieces of work to do. But I am very conscious that we don't use expensive management consultants.
The Trust has recently been awarded and recognised as a Centre for Excellence for Urogynecology. Can you tell us more about this and what it will mean for patients?
I think it's something, again, we should be really proud of. So these are services that are provided on the Burnley site. There's only 17 units that have got this accreditation anywhere in the country, and you've got to reach the very highest and stringent quality standards and performance standards. And we've done that because we've got some incredibly gifted clinicians, doctors, nurses, other staff that work in this unit, and it is really one of the jewels in our crown in Pennine, Lancashire. It's something that we need to hold on to, and it's a service that we're going to grow. So it's under the guidance of one of our senior clinicians, Simon Hill, and I'm delighted that we got this accreditation, and it allows us then to market our services and really showcase what we do. So it's great news.
Congratulations on that. A question, if I may, Kevin. You've been here almost 2 years now, is it?
2.5 years.
How different is the trust? How different are your expectations? Is it what you expected?
I mean, my expectations grow day in, day out. What I see are some of the most dedicated staff that you will see anywhere in any hospital in the country, in the world. I see some of the best services that you will see. It's fair to say that we've had some difficult times, and we were in special measures, but we've come out of special measures. We've recently had our CQC confirmation of good across the patch, and what I would like us to do now over the next couple of years is to really push on and to get an outstanding recognition for the services that we provide. Our communities deserve nothing less, and I think our staff can deliver that.
Well, let's talk about that, because you've recently held a CQC summit. Tell me more about that and how the CQC envision what is going on within the trust.
So it was a really positive event. We invited stakeholders, staff, and the CQC presented back the findings of their most recent visits, and it was very, very positive. They recognised the tremendous work that was going on. Indeed, some of our services they already recommend and classify as being outstanding. So some of our surgical areas have already been classified as outstanding. I then responded to the CQC report and talked about how proud I was and the work that we've done, but also laid the foundations for the future about what we wanted to do and how we were going to move forward to achieve outstanding status across the board over the next couple of years or so. So it was a really joyous event. I think it was a celebration of everything that we do well in the Trust. It was also a recognition that there's still things that we need to improve upon, and we must always be careful of that, because we can improve and we must improve, and there was recognition of that. But it was just a celebration, and it was nice for the staff to be recognised after all these years as being good for what they do day in, day out.
And knowing you as I do, it seems to me that you're driven to actually getting there. You will get there. That's your goal.
We will get there, and that's absolutely my goal. I think in the roles that we do, you have to be driven, and you can never accept that you've reached where you need to be, because I think hospitals, that they are very organic places. They never stay still, and the moment you think that you're going to stay still, you will start to go back. So you either go back or you go forward, and I'm determined that East Lancs will go forward.
You've had a new appointment of a new non-executive director, Richard Smith. Tell me a little bit about Richard.
So Richard is local. I mean, he's lived in Pennine, Lancashire for quite some time. Professional background. He is the non-exec role in trusts, I think, is really important on the board, because they just bring that level of scrutiny and challenge. So they keep people such as myself and my executive team on our toes, and they always ask what at one level may seem as the simple questions, but they're always the most difficult questions to answer. So I think the non-executive role is really important, and I'm really pleased that Richard has joined us, because he will be a great addition to the board.
And I think it would be prudent of us to give our thanks, the patients of East Lancashire's thanks, to Liz Sedgley, who's stepping down from her position as non-executive director after 8 years on the board.
Yes, and Liz has been great. I mean, Liz has been on the board for 2 terms now, which is in excess of 8 years. She's given an awful lot of service, and I think it was great for Liz that she could see us from the dark times when we were in special measures through to requires improvement, and then she finishes as the Trust gets a good rating. And Liz is the one non-exec who'd been with us through all of that process, and it was great for her that she went out with such a blaze of glory, and I think we all owe Liz a great debt of gratitude.
Of course, there are a number of staff who've worked at the Trust for a number of years, but I'd like to give my personal thanks to Lorraine Bentley, who's retiring after 38 years at the Trust, and who's perhaps been instrumental in improving domestic processes and all aspects of nutrition to patients. Do you think her loss is going to be felt?
Oh, without doubt. Again, one of the things that I think we should be really proud of in East Lancashire is many of our staff have been with us for an awful long time. It shows the dedication and the commitment they have to our services, and Lorraine is a great example of that. As you say, she's been with us for well over 30 years, and she's always very dedicated, very professional. You talk about being driven before. She is incredibly driven to improve catering, domestics, support services, and she will be an undoubted loss to the Trust.
Having personally been involved in a number of projects with Lorraine, I will miss her and wish her the best of luck for her retirement. Kevin, that's it for now. A reminder that anyone can send in a question for the Chief Executive Officer to the email address at the end of this presentation. But a reminder also that general complaints must be handled by the hospital's own procedures, details of which can be found on the ELHT website. Kevin McGee, Chief Executive at East Lancashire Hospitals Trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ.